decided to study religion on my own and do that outside of the church. And that was just a decision that I made with the Lord. And so last year when I called Jesus into my life and I asked for his salvation, this seemed like the perfect way to do it. Being around family and friends and no one else, having a small group of people, and the most spiritual people I know in this world are in this room right here. And I've been going to church since I was a baby, and this is the most at home I have felt with God ever, because I am in the presence of these people, and there are literally, most of y'all just beam light off of y'all. So y'all, I just want to say, y'all are the best family, the best friends that I could ever ask for. So I mean that.
We feel the same about you, Chase.
Yep. I do want to start off with a little bit of kind of how I got here. I do think that is important, and I thought that was something that I should talk about. In my sophomore year, my family and I made a decision that, looking back, was probably not the best decision, but I do thank God every single day for it, to try out a different charter school in the area that I was living in at the time, Dripping Springs. At that school, I was alienated from God, and I was alienated from family. My life took a pretty big spiral, pretty big twist. There's a lot of y'all that have been here since the very beginning of that and watched that unfold. There's a lot of y'all that try to give me warning signs, try to stop me, and I just ignored it. And that is where my journey starts, and it got worse and worse as those years progressed. And what I learned when I woke up in 2020 is the road that I was going down has a bunch of concrete pillars that are in the way all over the place. And usually you can avoid most of them. You're going to hit a couple, you're going to bang your car up, but you're going to get around them. But what nobody tells you is at the end of this road is a 5-ton concrete boulder. And it fully covers the road. And death, destruction, sin, and Satan are the only things that are at that end of that road. And that was the road that I was heading down. And as I said, I want to say thank you to everyone who tried to get me out of that spin, and I just never listened. And 2020 was a huge year for me. I know it was one of the worst years in our entire globe. I know it was one of the worst years in humanity as history speaks it, but for me it was one of the best years of my life. It really was. I got to have an amazingly close relationship with my parents and my sister, and that bond grew stronger in 2020, and that's where I woke up. But there's a few things that led up to that. And it starts with Matt Chips over here. I met Matt in 2019 when I moved back home. He's a gun nerd just like I am, and we went out for the first time and shot guns. He let me shoot some guns I've never had the ability to shoot before, and that was a fantastic day. I got to meet Victoria and see how amazing and incredible these people are. And we had dinner on an August night of 2019, and we talked about religion, and that ended up being a 5 or 6 hour conversation of just going back and forth. And honestly, I don't know how this man survived it, because for me, looking back on it, it looks like it was an interrogation. I was just hitting this man with questions every 5 seconds. We should have had a spotlight over you, and it would have been a police interrogation, right? But that was the seeds that was planted in my heart that day. And about 5 months later, in November of 2019, my father got the flu. And on November 16th, I woke up 6 o'clock in the morning. The Lord woke me up, I think, and saw a text from my mother that she has rushed my father to the hospital around 4 o'clock in the morning. He had bilateral pneumonia, and in those early days, the story was grim. We had a good feeling that he might survive this, but the doctors were telling us, he's going to be in the hospital for 2 months, and then there's going to be 6 to a year of recovery, and we just knew our whole life has changed. My dad is so strong. He's the most spiritual person, one of the most spiritual people that I know, and he is my rock and he is my hero. He got out of that in 2 weeks. And nothing ever came out of that. He never had a long recovery. He never had speech impairment. He never had walking issues or anything that these doctors told us. And yet I did not wake up to that. I did not wake up to Jesus, calling me right there, come to me, and I can save you. About 4 to 6 months after that, it was, I believe, around March 2020, the Breonna Taylor case happened in our country, and I woke up on a political front. And then about 3 weeks after that, I was going through this whole period of opening history books and looking at the media, and looking at the news, and looking at the state of our country, and these seeds are just slowly getting planted. And about 3 weeks after that, I witnessed a head-on collision in Dripping Springs involving 3 elderly people all over the age of 80. It was a 60-mile-per-hour crash that I witnessed, and I got out to assist with medical. Somehow, all 3 people walked away from the crash with cuts and bruises. This one lady was in so much shock that she could not move. She thought she was paralyzed. I could feel a pulse in her foot. I could see her tingle in her toes, so I knew that she was not paralyzed, but she was in a lot of shock. And this lady asked me to pray. She asked me to pray. And, at that time, I had this attitude of, sure, I'll pray for you. If that's going to make you feel better, if that's going to, whatever, there's no God up there or whatever, but sure, if that's how you want to do, then we'll do it that way. So I prayed for her. And I can't tell you what happened next. I can't describe it. There's no earthly terms to describe what happened to me next. It was this calmness. There was this chaos at the same time, this wind. I felt like the world was moving. I felt like I could feel every single blood vessel in my body. It's like I got lit up. And just like they show in the movies, I remember looking up to the sky, and I feel like the sun got 5 times brighter for just that couple of seconds. It was a feeling like I've never had in my entire life, and it scared me. I went home, closed the door in my room, shut down, was interacting with family but for about 2 weeks I was just in this really weird cycle of what in the world just happened to me. I mean, this is something I've never experienced in my life before. And that was God. That was God who called me that day. And this time I answered. This time I answered. And looking back on those early days, I honestly think the only reason my father survived his trauma, the only reason he survived that hospital visit, is because the Lord knew that I would be a new man one day. And I don't think God wanted my dad's last memories on this earth or his struggling recovery of a disappointment of a son. And so I think that's why God kept Dad here. And I genuinely believe that still to this day. That the only reason Dad survived that is because God knew that it may not be today, but in a little while he's going to come home. So that part of it, that part still eats at me every day. I'm so grateful for that. So that's where my life kind of was in 2020. And the thing is, though, is I don't believe I was still on the right road. I still think I was going down that concrete road filled with concrete barriers. I just think now I found the light on that road. I've been driving down this dark road for years, and finally there's a little flicker. Because shortly after this, I got into a relationship with someone. And at the time, I was so excited about it because I was like, maybe this is why it's never happened for me before. Because I needed to find God first. I genuinely thought that in the early days of 2020. God called me out of that relationship in February of 2021. Dated this person for less than 7 months. He called me out of it because I genuinely believe this after a ton of reflecting that I have done on the matter. I genuinely believe he let me have this period in my time where I got my way so that I could feel like I'm kind of in control or that it's my way. And then he took it all from me in January of 2021. He says, I have a better path for you. It's time to now get you off of this concrete road and let's take you down a totally different path. So I took a full 180 and went in, as fast as I could down the opposite direction. And I think that was the first time I was put on a path filled with light, filled with Jesus, and filled with love and family. and I got to reunite and be closer with my family than I have ever been in my entire life. I got to meet amazing people in this time period. Dave Farmer has been there through a lot of it, and he has watched these pitfalls through 2020 that I had, these ups and downs, and I think Dave can say that he watched me turn 180 on that road and make a different direction. And I think anyone who has been with me through that 2020 and 2021 period can see that as well. So I want to, again say thank you to Dave for everything that he's done for me. Thank you for my parents. Thank you for everyone that I've spoken about this morning. Without y'all, this would have never happened. Last year, 2021, November, I called Jesus into my life and I asked him to save me, to give me salvation. Ashley is going to speak in a minute a little bit about that process of baptism, because you do it first with Jesus, and then you have, I don't want to call it a showing, I don't really even know the right word to say with it, but then you have something for all of your family to see so that they can witness the greatest achievement that you can have in your life. And that's where we are today. So I've asked Jesus into my life last year. I've asked him to take my life over and lead me down the path that he wants me to be led down. And I have asked Matt Chips and I've asked Ashley today to speak about baptism and to actually baptize me today in front of all of y'all. And I mean that from the deepest of my heart. Thank you guys to both of y'all. So that's kind of my testimony. I think that's kind of where I will leave it, nice and hard.
Anything else, Ashley?
I'm going to turn the floor over here to Ashley, and she's